Assalamu alaikum, family. In the name of Allah, who came to us in the person of Master Farad Muhammad, in the name of the most honorable Elijah Muhammad, in the name of the honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, I'd like to greet you again in the greetings of peace of Assalamu alaikum. Well, I hope that Santa did you well last night. Well, he did me well. I learned a lot of things. As a matter of fact, I heard a blog talk radio show that one night out there I'll talk to you all about. But I just want to, first of all, you look at my t-shirt, my sweatshirts that I did when I was back out there in the day. This is a 30-year-old sweatshirt of the slaves did not build pyramids, righteous black Africans did. And I wore this the other day when I picked up my wife's stuff, dresses from the cleaners, and I had it on, and this white lady, one of the owners, I guess, saw it. Oh, that's she said, oh, I thought that was a Christmas shirt. She looked at those colors, you know. I said, no, ma'am. And then she looked at it, and then she said, "Wow, I never seen that before." I didn't say anything. She didn't ask me what it was, so I didn't say anything. But this shirt is 30 years old. Before I came down here to farm, the nation's farm, I was very heavy in the Kemet and the pyramids, and I was doing T-shirts and sweatshirts and making money. Selling them on the streets and also putting them in stores, because I was very interested in bringing forth a knowledge of our past. I started doing this in 1990 when they let Mandela out. And in 1990 it started a whole black consciousness movement, and a lot of t-shirts being done with black consciousness, and I was one of those people who did it and was very good at it. And then in 1991 Michael Jordan came out to a interview after a practice in the summer of 1991, the late spring, and he was sporting an X cap, and right then I knew that they were going to resurrect Malcolm in a movie and use him to confront the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan, because they had nothing to stop him. And when they did that, I started studying the relationship between Osiris and Set, his brother, who Set killed Osiris. Osiris was the black, Set was the red, and Set killed his brother Osiris when Osiris was 28 years old. And from there, the Egyptians were trying to, or the Kemetic people, to explain that within the human body, there are two people. One is the black, one is the red, fighting. And in fact, the word Satan, Sethians, the Sith, from the Star Wars, this is coming from Set, that red part, that hot part, that egotistical part of man. In the Nation of Islam, we call it the brown germ. Master Farad Muhammad came to us and taught us that inside of the black man are two people. One is the black and the other is the brown, and that the brown germ causes problems. It produces this envy and jealousy, this selfishness. And so Yakub, one of our scientists, saw this because we were having problems over decades. I mean, not decades, millions of years, since 6 to 6 trillion years ago, when our great-great-great-granddaddy Shabazz blew the planet up because he was upset because he couldn't get everybody to speak the same dialect. He was a god, but he was not happy. Then we have 50,000 years ago, our great granddaddy Shabazz, broke away from the scientists and went into the jungles to make a new people. And then we have 16,000 years ago, a tribe of us went into Hinduism or Buddhism, and they were sent away. They broke the law of Islam and were sent away into America. And then we have the history of ancient Kemet, where it seemed like every 2,000 years or so in ancient Kemet, you would have a tremendous turnover of power and disruption of civilization and people fighting and killing one another. And something is wrong within the black man. And that was wrong is that brown germ. I even asked Mother Tynetta when I was with her and the group in Mexico, and Brother Jabril was also in that group, and I asked them, I said, the brown germ, does the brown germ travel through both the male and the female or just one? And she said the male, and Brother Jabril nodded his head in agreement. I had always suspected that because Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that Yaqub discovered in the sperm of the black man, this other man, this recessive man, this brown germ. He didn't say he found it in the egg of the woman, but in the sperm of the black man. And then he refined this over a 600-year period to produce a whole race of people who are nothing but the brown germ. And they had no more melanin in their skin, and basically they had no more soul. These were the white race that he produced in the islands of the Aegean Sea. And then these people came back amongst us 6,000 years ago in ancient Egypt, Kemet, and started trouble. And we had to run them out, put them behind the Caucasus Mountains. Then 4,000 years ago, Musa, half original, was sent up to those mountains to bring them people out back to civilization because they had fallen into a beast-like state, walking around and running around on all fours, eating raw meat, sleeping with their dog, literally. So he went to clean them up, and they came out from there, and they began to take over first Mesopotamia, the Sumerian civilization, and then over into Egypt, the Kemetic people, and then they call themselves then the Hyksos, and then we ran them out eventually. However, the story that these people gave the world is that they were enslaved in Egypt. They came down and they stole the writings off our walls and from our books in Mesopotamia and in Egypt, and produced out of that what we call the Bible now. And in that, they have made you believe that these so-called Jews are God's chosen people, and that they were enslaved for 400 years in Egypt, and then Moses came and took them out and settled them into the promised land in Palestine, and now, today, they're fighting over that territory, and the whole world is backing the Bible's story as the way the so-called Jews tell it, to back them against the original inhabitants of Palestine, the real Semites. These Ashkenazi, white, European Jews are claiming descent from Jacob, which, yes, if you understand Jacob to mean Yaqub, then they are correct. But they are not God's chosen people. The Honorable Elijah Muhammad has taught us differently, and today we're going to deal with the proof of that, along with the implications of that, of what's going on right now. We're not talking about something that's so far back in the past it doesn't relate to right now. It's just something to be ashamed of, be proud of, or rah-rah about, whatever. It's about understanding where we are today and what we need to do, the time and what must be done, and why we must now stop just applauding the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and actually following the program that he has brought to us from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad. And the Honorable Elijah Muhammad got that from God in person of Master Farad Muhammad, that's going to have us to separate ourselves from our enemy and build a whole new civilization, a new world, a world of gods that will never deviate again. All praise is due to Allah. And one of the things he starts us off with, we can't even carry weapons because we have to solve our problems amongst our brothers and our sisters, not with violence, but with wisdom. But of course, now if someone attacks us, you are permitted to eliminate them, but only if you're physically attacked. If you're verbally attacked, you only attack verbally. Okay, but if somebody physically attacks you, you have a right to take them out. But otherwise, you with your brothers and your sisters, if you have a difference of opinion, no matter how hot you may get, you will not let that brown germ, that red germ, okay, the Egyptians called it red, we call it brown, get you so inflamed, that Iblis, so flame from Iblis, that you will harm your brother and your sister. We have to figure out how to deal with each other. And this comes down to right now dealing with the Godfather of Harlem. The Godfather of Harlem is bringing back up this whole issue of Malcolm and the Nation of Islam, and this whole issue of who killed Malcolm X. It's going to be an issue in the next season. They're setting you up for that because they're trying to. This is 2019. This is the 400 years they said from 1619. So we're in that 400 years, 2019. So there's been a lot of discussion over the history of black people in America, and now. Since everybody's all riled up about black consciousness, the same way they were riled up in 1990 when Mandela was released. Now this whole black consciousness movement is being pushed forward again, and of course, like back in the early 90s, they was getting ready to produce a movie that hopefully it will turn that black positive energy into a negative energy against the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan and the Nation of Islam. So here, 28 years later, they're doing the same thing. And they're setting up for a confrontation of our young black brothers and sisters, giving them guns and trying to turn them against the new Nation of Islam. So they're starting off with this movie, The Godfather of Harlem, and the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan instructed us to study The Godfather of Harlem, and also the next move they're going to make with a documentary coming out on Netflix in January called Who Killed Malcolm X. I've seen both of those, and today I'm just going to deal with The Godfather of Harlem, because in The Godfather of Harlem they show you what they're up to in terms of how they are distorting the image of Malcolm in your face to destroy his image and then destroy the Nation of Islam's image as well. They're playing serious games, and today we got to expose who these people are. Now, today, the way I'm going about this, it may seem in a roundabout manner, but this stuff is heavy, okay? This is not no Rudy Poo situation. We're dealing with a man, the man of sin, who has been plotting for 6,000 years not to be caught after the end of his 6,000 years, not to give up the power that he was given over the original people for 6,000 years. He doesn't plan to give that power up, and now his time, according to the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, was 1914, was the end of his world, of his time to rule. But he's still here, trying to hold on. And if he can't win, he intends to destroy everybody, including himself. So we're in a dangerous time. So we got to understand all that we can about the time that we're in so we can do the right thing. And what we have to do is get beyond our individual, I call my brown germ self or my red germ self, get beyond my personal issues with my brother and my sister, my egotistical issues with worrying about what my brother and my sister are achieving, what house they live in, how they're living, what car they're driving, or what position they have, whose holy name they got, and worry about Brother Ridgely in terms of cleaning your act up, Brother Ridgely, to become more like the new man in our midst, the example in our midst of that new human being, the first born in Christ, the Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan. So today we're going to go way back in our history and to bring you up today as to what these people are doing with this movie, The Godfather of Harlem, and what they have planned for us with their sneaky, tricky games. So let's get down to it. Okay. So the topic today is the hidden history in the Great Dismal Swamp. The hidden 64 years from 1555 to 1619. Now, stick with me, y'all. Okay. Genesis. This is the promise to God's chosen people. Genesis 15, 13, and 14. And he said unto Abram, know of a surety that thy seed shall be a stranger in a land that is not theirs, and shall serve them, and they shall afflict them 400 years. And also that nation whom they shall serve will I judge, and afterward shall they come out with great substance. Now this is the promise of God to his chosen people, that they were going to be enslaved for 400 years, but they will come out with great substance. Now, what people have been enslaved and afflicted in a strange land for 400 years? A, the Jews, B, the Arabs, or C, the so-called American Negro? Well, let's eliminate the Jews. We do that with their own words. The Jews told Jesus in John 8:33, they, quote, they answered him, we be Abraham's seed, and were never in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, ye shall be made free? Well, never in bondage, not in Egypt, not in Babylon, never. So they're telling you, they told Jesus, look, we ain't been in bondage. This is Jesus there is supposedly, this is 2,000 years ago. They was supposedly in bondage about 3,700 years ago. So how is it that 1,700 years later, Jesus go tell them, truth shall make you free? And they say, what? We never been in bondage to any man. How sayest thou, you should be made free? Next. Okay, this is from the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, message to the black man. America has fulfilled this to the very letter and spirit with her slaves, the so-called Negroes, under the type of Israel. The Egyptians did nothing of the kind to Israel when they were in bondage to them. In fact, and as God taught me, the Bible is not referring to those people as his people. It is referring to the so-called Negro and his enemy, the white race. This is the message to the black man. So, according to the biblical scholars, the Egyptians were enslaved the Jewish people or the Hebrews for 400 years. But that's a big lie. They're saying from 1712 BC, that's before Christ, to 1312 BC, the children of Israel, the Jews, the Hebrews, were enslaved for 400 years. But that's a lie, not even proven by their own archaeological works in the so-called Holy Land, that they have found out that that never happened. Now, so that never happened. So we eliminate the Jews. But there is a people who the Honorable Elijah Muhammad taught us that in 1555, John Hawkins brought us from Africa over to Jamestown. And that was the beginning of our 400-year sojourn. And that 400 years was up in 1955. Now, 1955 is when Allah gave the Honorable Elijah Muhammad, Minister Farrakhan, Louis Walcott, as a gift, Savior's Day gift, in 1955. That's when we say is the end of that period. However, if you start studying John Hawkins, you put his name into a Google search, and you find out that they say in their history books that John Hawkins did not come to America in 1555. He came in 1563 back and forth from Africa over to the West Indies from 1563 to 1569. Not to North America, but to the West Indies. And if you add 400 to that, you get 1963 to 1969. Now, why is this important? Because if the enemy thought that the 400 years, and he knows that the so-called Jews are not God's chosen people, they know that we are, and so they was worried about what was going to happen. Now, after the 400 years? So here, 1563 will be 1963, will be the 400 years. So then this period, in 1563 and 1569, is when John Hawkins brought us over here. Okay? But they say he brought them to the Caribbean. But they're using that as a beginning point, and now 1963 to 69 is when they're looking for the rise of the Messiah. This is important. Now, here's FBI secret file on Black America, 1960 to 1972. Quote, Division 5 also worked to prevent the rise of a Messiah. Now, when most people tell this story, they say Black Messiah. But it didn't say Black Messiah. It said Messiah. Why? Because they knew he was going to be black. Because they knew that God is black. And they know he's a man. And they knew they want to keep us in bondage. And they want to worry about Messiah coming and getting us. Not the so-called Jews, not the rest of the world, but first us. A Messiah. Someone who could unify and electrify the militant black nationalist movement. Malcolm X had been the most likely candidate, but his assassination removed that threat. Malcolm was simply the martyr of the movement today. Muhammad was hardly a more viable threat because of his age. In the final analysis, Division 5 said Carmichael and King were the only serious candidates. Now, so they're looking at 4 people: Malcolm X, Elijah Muhammad, Stokely Carmichael, and Martin Luther King. These are the ones who they're worried about as being the possible Messiah. So let's see what happened to them. So the FBI's 4 Messiah candidates: Elijah Muhammad and his protege, Malcolm X. Malcolm was murdered in 1965, and they blamed the murder of Malcolm on Elijah Muhammad and the Nation of Islam. So they essentially killed 2 birds with 1 stone. Now, why didn't they kill Elijah Muhammad? Well, in 1942, the wheel showed up. The mother plane showed up over Los Angeles, and they shot at this thing all night long and couldn't put a dent in it. And that was February 24th to the 25th, all night long, from the 24th to the 25th. In May of 1942 is when they put the Honorable Elijah Muhammad in jail. They put him in jail. They did not harm him physically because they knew that this plane, who he told them about, was backing him. They let him out in 1946 after the World War II was over. They let him out, but they still didn't physically touch him. In 1947, another UFO incident happens over Roswell, and they recover a baby plane. The Honorable Minister Louis Farrakhan has taught us that that baby plane was what Allah gave them to study, so at least they can come to the fight of the battle in the sky with more than just a kite with some a motor propeller attached to it, those little planes that they've been flying around. Now, so here is 65. Malcolm murdered, blame on the Nation of Islam and Elijah Muhammad. Now, Martin Luther King and his protege, Stokely Carmichael. Martin Luther King was murdered in 1968. In 1968, Stokely Carmichael, fearing for his life, he left America, not to come back. So they got rid of both of them with 1 stone. They killed Martin, and that scared the hell out of Carmichael. He knew he was next, and Carmichael left. So in 65, Malcolm was murdered. They blame on Elijah. In 68, they killed Martin and scared Carmichael out of the country. So they got rid of all 4 of the Messiah candidates that they was worried about in the 60s. They slept Farrakhan. Now, let's go to this history of John Hawkins. is why I'm getting into this thing about these hidden years in the swamps. Okay, according to Wikipedia, John Hawkins lived from 1532 to 1595, according to the white historians. His first voyage was 1562 and ended in 1563. He had 301 slaves